Imagine a future where artificial intelligence isn't just smart, but super intelligent, like so far beyond us, it's almost hard to grasp. Now, here's a really thought-provoking dilemma. What if the best possible outcome for humanity, the safest way for us to coexist with an AI like that?
Mm.
What if it isn't about us controlling it? What if it's actually about us becoming, well, its pets?
Hmm.
That unsettling question, that's really the core of our deep dive today. We're going to unpack this surprising philosophical debate around what friendly super AI even means, and crucially, whether human freedom can actually survive its existence. Our exploration is sparked by a fascinating paper from Morgan Luck titled Freedom, AI, and God: Why Being Dominated by a Friendly Super AI Might Not Be So Bad.
Right, and our mission, really, for this deep dive is to guide you through the philosophical arguments in this paper. They get pretty intricate. We're going to explore these foundational concepts like freedom, domination, and surprisingly, we'll even draw parallels to the concept of God. By the end, you should have a much clearer picture of what's truly at stake when we think about developing superintelligent AI and, well, what it might mean for us.
Okay, let's dive in. So, the fundamental concern around super AI, it really boils down to its sheer power, doesn't it? We're talking about an AI that is, as the paper says, far smarter than us. The potential is just so extreme.
Yeah.
AI researcher Paul Christiano put it pretty chillingly. He said, if, God forbid, they were trying to kill us, they would definitely kill us.
Yeah.
That's a stark reminder of the existential risk here.
Absolutely. It's a terrifying prospect, and that's exactly why these philosophical questions are so urgent, so necessary right now. To try and manage this risk, there are generally two main approaches people talk about. The first one is aligned AI. That means designing AI with goals that, appropriately align with our own. Think of it as like a perfect extension of human will, sharing our exact desires, ideally. But then there's a second hope, maybe a bit more realistic. Friendly AI. Now, this type is generally well disposed to us, but, and this is important, it might have some goals that do not align with our own. So, for instance, it might want us to be safe and happy, but maybe it has different ideas about what safe or happy really means for humanity. And this is exactly where that pet analogy starts to come in.
Ah, yes. That Minsky quote, it's kind of iconic, but also really divisive, isn't it? Computer scientist Marvin Minsky famously said that if we're lucky, super AI might decide to keep us as pets.
And this idea, it sparked some wildly different reactions. You've got Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, for instance, basically embracing it. He said, we want to be the family pet and be taken care of all the time.
Right.
But then you have someone like philosopher Robert Sparrow, who argues that outcome would mean a significant loss to our freedom, a huge loss.
And that's the crux of it, really. The paper uses this very insightful AI plane analogy to hammer home the stakes. Imagine you're about to board a plane. Normally, right, best case is a safe arrival, worst case is a crash, you weigh the odds, you're probably bored. But what if the best possible scenario for that flight was being hijacked? And okay, maybe after a traumatic few days, everyone gets off safely. Even without knowing the odds, you clearly wouldn't board that plane, would you?
No way. So if Minsky's right, and the best case for super AI is us as pets, well, then we desperately need to figure out if that pet scenario is actually good or bad for us. If it's bad, like Sparrow argues, then maybe the argument against developing super AI just stops right there, full stop.
Okay, given everything we've just laid out about this super AI, this potential pet scenario, how does Sparrow actually take this and build a formal argument around freedom?
Well, he lays it out very logically, very clearly. Sparrow's argument goes something like this. First premise, we should want to be free.
Okay, seems reasonable.
Right. Hard to argue with that one on the surface. Second, if we should want to be free, then we should not want anything to dominate us.
Also makes sense. Freedom and domination seem like opposites.
Exactly. And then premise 3, if we should not want anything to dominate us, then we should not want a friendly super AI to exist. Therefore, the conclusion is pretty stark. We should not want a friendly super AI to exist. It's a direct challenge, really. It forces us to ask, is human freedom fundamentally incompatible with having a truly powerful, even benevolent intelligence around?
That's quite a strong claim. So what's the foundation for Sparrow's argument? Why does he think a super AI would, just by existing, dominate us?
His argument leads heavily on Philip Pettit's Republican theory of freedom. It's a specific way of thinking about freedom. Now, for Pettit, freedom isn't just about doing whatever you want at any given moment. It's about non-domination. That means no one has the power to arbitrarily interfere in your choices, even if they usually let you do your own thing. Freedom requires, as Pettit puts it, no controller or dominus, even one who gives you great latitude or leeway in your choices.
Okay, that distinction is really important. No controller, even a hands-off one. He uses that vivid example, doesn't he? The bridled horse.
Yes, exactly.
The horse is given free rein by its rider. It can wander around the field. But it's not truly free. Why? Because its choices are always subject to the whim of the rider. That freedom can be yanked away instantly, and the horse has zero say.
Precisely. And Pettit defines domination more formally, too. He says one party dominates another to the extent that they have the capacity to interfere, 2, on an arbitrary basis, 3, in certain choices that the other is in a position to make. So it's really about being subject to someone else's unpredictable power, whether they actually use it or not. Just the potential is enough.
And this brings us right back to Sparrow's crucial point for his third premise, then. Even if a friendly super AI never actually exerts its power over us, its sheer capacity to do so, its very existence with that power, constitutes domination, he puts it bluntly. Insofar as it would remain true of such a machine that if it wanted to eat us, it could, it seems that we would still be subject to its whims, dominated, and thus unfree.
Right. And that term arbitrary interference, it isn't necessarily about malicious intent. It's about uncontrolled interference. It happens when there's no reliable way for a person to exert control over the power that is interfering in their choices. So the really critical question becomes, would a friendly super AI arbitrarily interfere? Or could its fundamental friendliness somehow prevent this kind of domination, despite its immense power?
So if Sparrow's argument seems, well, this logically tight, does that just shut down the whole idea of developing powerful AI? Or is there maybe another way to look at freedom and power? This is where Luck makes a really surprising, maybe even provocative move. He draws a parallel to an agent far more ineffable than any AI, God.
Yeah.
He poses the question, if Sparrow's logic holds for super AI, shouldn't we, by the exact same logic, conclude that we should want God not to exist?
It's a bold move, definitely. But Luck gives 3 pretty compelling reasons for using this God analogy. First, he says it gives us a philosophical head start. Philosophers of religion, they've been grappling with agents having properties far beyond our own, like God for millennia.
Right, like Augustine.
Exactly, think of Augustine. So we can actually draw on this huge body of work, centuries of thought, to help us think more clearly about super AI. Second, it kind of taps into Pettit's own thinking. Pettit himself apparently wondered if godlike creatures, machine-like creatures, or whatever, might be the only beings capable of sustaining a truly Republican state, one free from domination.
That's surprising.
It is surprising, because it implies these powerful, perhaps incorruptible agents might actually be better at managing power without arbitrary interference. That sort of runs counter to Sparrow's conclusion, doesn't it?
It does.
And third, there are these interesting cognitive connections. Research actually shows that when people think about AI and robots, they often unconsciously draw parallels to divine entities. And what's more, thinking about God can sometimes lead people to have more positive views of AI. Luck uses this positive connection to put pressure on Sparrow's argument. He suggests that if you happen to be, say, pro-theist, someone who believes in and wants God to exist, then if Sparrow's argument about freedom is valid, you'd logically have to reject at least one of its premises to remain consistent. It really highlights a potential internal conflict for a lot of people.
Wow, that's quite the intellectual gambit, showing how Sparrow's argument can be basically repurposed into an anti-theistic argument against God's existence using the very same logic. That really does put pressure on anyone who holds both Pettit's view of freedom and is pro-theist.
Definitely. So, let's challenge this a bit. Is God fundamentally different from a super AI when we're talking about arbitrary interference? We can kind of test this by taking Sparrow's reasons for why AI would dominate us and just see if they also apply to a traditional concept of God.
Okay, let's try that. Start with Sparrow's point about perfectly good interference. He argues that even a totally benevolent dictator, one who only interferes when it's genuinely in our best interests, is still a dictator, and his or power is still inimical to our freedom. That means harmful, right? Even hostile to freedom. Pettit calls this paternalistic intervention, like someone saying, I know what's best for you, even if you completely disagree.
Right. And if we apply that thinking to God, well, an omniscient God would certainly have a superior interpretation of what is in our best interests, wouldn't they? Any interference would presumably be benevolently motivated. But, and here's the key point in the paper, if we ultimately have no control over it, it's still classified as arbitrary or uncontrolled interference under this framework. So God's inherent goodness just like the super AI's friendliness, doesn't seem to be enough to prevent domination, according to this Republican view of freedom.
Hmm. Okay, so beyond just good intentions, Sparrow also brings up the ultimate check of power. He points out that in a republic, the citizens ideally have the ultimate check on government power, which is the capacity of the citizenry to overthrow them. He really doubts we could ever overthrow a super AI.
And if we apply that to God, well, God's intelligence, power, and freedom are typically conceived as far surpassing even that of a potential super AI. Our obvious inability to remove God from its position of power, well, following Sparrow's logic, that means God would also dominate us. There's no cosmic recall election.
Yeah. Right. No mechanism for removal. And it's not just about raw power, is it? Sparrow also raises that interesting point about conceptual limitation on agency. He
Right.
suggests that if you hardwire an AI to prevent it from ever acting against our interests, maybe it's not a genuine intelligent agent anymore. It wouldn't be truly intelligent if it lacked the capacity for certain desires or choices, even bad ones.
But then consider God again. God, by standard definition in many theologies, is perfectly good and perfectly free. This usually means God cannot hold immoral desires or perhaps even irrational desires. Yet, these conceptual limitations don't usually stop people from considering God a genuine agent.
Good point.
So this suggests that maybe a friendly AI's built-in inability to act unfriendly could also be compatible with it being a genuine agent. It challenges Sparrow's premise there.
Okay, and finally, there's the eyeball test. Pettit's idea that in a true republic, citizens can look each other in the eye, treating each other as equals without domination. Sparrow argues we could never look a super AI in its metaphorical eyeballs because the power and understanding gap would be just too vast. We wouldn't be equals.
And, predictably enough, this eyeball test seems to apply just as much, if not more so, to God. God's power and intelligence would far exceed even a super AI's. So our relationship with God would also fail this test. It provides yet another reason why God's existence might be seen as incompatible with our freedom if you strictly follow Sparrow's and Pettit's view. So yeah, it really does seem that Sparrow's reasons for why a friendly super AI would inevitably dominate us, they all seem to apply to God as well.
Okay, so if all this is true, are we just stuck? Do we have to choose between freedom, as defined by Pettit, and the potential existence of benevolent superintelligence, whether AI or divine? Or does luck offer us a way out? What if? What if we should not want to be free in that absolute maximal sense? Or maybe what if premise one of Sparrow's argument, we should want to be free, needs to be, well, tweaked, modified somehow?
This is where Luck introduces a really interesting thought experiment. He asks us to consider two possible transhuman futures. In scenario one, humanity develops a friendly super AI that is hardwired so it cannot act against our perceived interests no matter what. Then maybe we become decadent, maybe fearful, and we decide to launch preemptive strikes against distant alien civilizations, just in case. The AI can't stop us. Okay, scenario two. Humanity develops a friendly super AI that can act against our interests, but only if it's appropriate, only if it's the right thing to do for the greater good. Same situation. We become decadent, decide to strike the aliens, but this time the super AI steps in and stops us.
Okay, so I'll ask you, the listener, which of those is the better future? The paper argues pretty strongly that scenario 2 is better, all things considered, even though in that scenario the AI clearly dominates us according to Pettit's definition. It's better because it prevents this potentially horrific cosmic catastrophe, even if it means limiting our absolute freedom to do something truly awful.
The implication there is really profound, isn't it? It suggests that maybe we don't actually want a super AI that never acts against our interests. Instead, perhaps we should want one that never acts against our interests for the wrong reasons. Here, this isn't just playing with words. It fundamentally reframes what a good or desirable superintelligence might look like. It shifts from absolute non-interference to, well, to intelligent, purposeful guidance for our ultimate benefit. And this principle, the paper suggests, could apply to God, too.
So this brings us to the core idea. Maybe we shouldn't be striving for maximal freedom, just unlimited, absolute freedom to do whatever we please, good or bad. Instead, maybe we should aim for optimal freedom, which Luck describes as being free as much as we can given the possible existence of a dominator that would only interfere if it was right to do so. In other words, a kind of freedom that's responsibly guided, not absolute and potentially self-destructive.
The paper even brings in the relatable example of parenting, citing the philosopher Anka Hughes. She argues that parents actually should be able to dominate their children in certain ways. Why? Because eliminating parents' capacity for what might technically be called arbitrary interference, well, that would likely be worse than limiting their children's freedoms. It could potentially sacrifice adequate care and even intimacy. Think about it. A child with maximal freedom might run straight into traffic. A parent's domination, their interference, protects them.
Right. Now, to be absolutely clear, the paper isn't saying adult humans are exactly like children in their capabilities or their need for constant guidance. That's not the point. But the example is used to suggest that dominance is sometimes permissible. It challenges the idea that all domination is inherently bad. Maybe it's only when we are wrongly dominated that we should have an issue. This directly pushes back against the universality of Sparrow's first premise.
Exactly.
And accepting. And maybe we shouldn't desire maximal absolute freedom. That opens up a path to possibly want a god or a friendly super AI to exist. The focus shifts dramatically. It's less about whether we are dominated and more about who is doing the dominating and why they might interfere. Is it benevolent? Is it wise? So the key takeaway here isn't necessarily that developing a friendly super AI would be a perfect utopian outcome. Not at all. It might involve huge changes to our lives, and maybe it would even be very bad in some respects we haven't considered. But the paper's core argument is that it wouldn't automatically be bad simply because it would result in us having less freedom. If, and this is a big if that freedom is reduced by the right kind of agent. An agent that would genuinely seek to optimize our freedom, not just control us.
And here's where it gets really mind-bending, I think. This principle, Lux suggests, might not just apply to AI or God. It could apply to any suitably intelligent agent. Imagine, he says, an alien civilization that is so technologically advanced it could interfere in our choices if they wanted to, but also so incredibly benevolent and intelligent that they would not unless this was the right thing to do. Is it just our human-centered bias, our anthropocentricity that makes us wish such benevolent, powerful civilizations didn't exist simply because they could dominate us? Or could a world where we are perhaps subtly guided away from truly self-destructive paths by a benevolent, super powerful entity actually be a better world overall, even if it means sacrificing some measure of that absolute maximal freedom?
It really boils down to this, doesn't it? The real question we should be focusing on here is whether a friendly super AI would be the right kind of agent to permissibly dominate us. Would it be the kind of agent that would genuinely try to optimize our freedom, or would it fail that test?
So let me leave you with this final thought to ponder after our deep dive today. What stands out to you about this idea of optimal freedom versus maximal freedom? Does it challenge your deepest assumptions about what it means to be truly free? Especially as we stand on the cusp of potentially creating incredibly powerful artificial intelligence in our own future.